Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Weekly Tangents. Jonathan,
Dylan.
how's your week going?
Out of all the weeks in my life, this one is definitely, a top 20 out of multiple, actually, shoot, let me think, 52 times 20. I don't know, it's in top 20 out of 1,000, probably.
Okay, that's honestly that makes me curious and want to ask more, but I'm just making small talk. So,
Oh, so now we're going on to big talk.
yeah, big talk.
So that was the shortest small talk section ever. Okay, let's get to the real deal.
Fuck you. I love you. Okay, so Jonathan, I've been watching some movies lately. You know, it's the holiday season. You look on Netflix, you throw something on the background, or you're actually gonna watch it. And
hmm
there's a movie that came up that is near and dear to my heart. That should be near and dear to yours as well, which
Elf.
is the live action Scooby Doo movie.
Oh my god, even worse.
Yes, and when I was trying to think of the podcast episode topic for this week, it just got me curious about like, well, that's one of my favorite bad movies of all time. But I know that you enjoyed it, but just I wanted to talk about bad movies, bad good movies, because there's a difference between like another one that we watched together was A Whisker Away. That movie just felt bad, and it's interesting of
Yeah.
like how certain things that are bad can be redeemingly bad. Some things can intentionally be made to be bad to be good, like Sharknado, and just how certain things end up that way, like the Scooby Doo thing. So I thought this would be an interesting topic for us to go for.
Okay, so bad movies, well, whether I like them or not, gonna kind of address them in different ways. Um, I guess I'll start with one that's not necessarily a bad movie, but just should not have had the staying power it had.
Hmm.
Um, I'm gonna start with Cars. It's a very
Like the Pixar cars.
yeah, the one that's kind of horrifying. Cars literally having mouths. Lightning McQueen has a lot of tongue action in it.
He does. He does. Is this bad for you, or is this bad good for you?
Well, it started off as bad good and then it got bad bad cuz I watched the movie. I kept count for a while cuz at my elementary school, my second one, every single time we had an inclement weather day, so when it was raining and they would bring us in cuz it never snows in California.
Yeah.
Okay, every single time they would play Cars, only the first one, without fail for the whole 3 years I spent in that school. So I counted every time and I got to watch that movie over 25 times.
My God.
So at first, okay, I'll play this. At first, the movie wasn't that bad. I actually liked the movie the first one, two, maybe even three times I watched it. Once you've watched it to be clear, I stopped counting after 25, so I don't know the actual number. But once you've watched that movie over 25 times, it loses its charm a little bit. So that was I'm sure it was a fine movie, but it got played so much I now just see it as a bad movie that was bad, especially when I saw Cars 2, which was somehow even worse on its first viewing than Cars 1 was on its 25th. But I never saw Cars 3, which I heard was actually quite redeeming, but it was just I was burned out on the series by the time that came out. So
Yeah, I think I saw Cars 3 on like an airplane ride to Korea one of those times. But I'm curious then, so was the last time that you've seen Cars like 10 years ago at this point then?
Uh, I think let's see. I watched Cars 2 just a couple years ago because it took me so long to even give it a chance after how many times I watched Cars 1. So then I finally watched Cars 2 and I'm like, "Oh, fuck that. Never going back to that series again." So it's probably within the last 5 years.
Okay, okay, that's fair enough. One that this one I don't remember if you watched or not, but were you at our friend Matthew's birthday where we watched Troll Hunter together?
I was not there for that.
Okay. I don't know why, I don't know who brought it up, but someone was like, "We have to watch Troll Hunter." And it's a high school birthday party, so you're all staying up till like 5, 6 a.m. anyway, getting 1 hour of sleep. And Troll Hunter, like the general synopsis is there's this guy in some Nordic country, and he goes out into the woods, and it's shot like a documentary, and I think it's supposed to be taken seriously. It could be a mockumentary for all I know. But where this guy's like, yeah, there's trolls out here in these woods and they, eat goats and humans and shit like that. And I'm a troll hunter. And it's just this whole thing where, first of all, the CGI, just the things that come up look terrible. And some of the plot lines are like, oh, yeah, you have to lure them out with Christian blood. They love the smell of Christian blood. And it's like, first of all, how does your religion have any effect on the smell of your blood. Like, that's just curious. Also, where the fuck did this guy get specifically Christian blood? Like, do you go to a blood bank and just request, how many Christians gave blood out here? And there were just so many things that were bad in the movie that it ended up being great. And that's actually one of the things I guess I wanted to bring up to you is like, what do you think makes a bad movie a good bad movie? And like, what do you think are the prerequisites? Because I had so much fun with that, but if I watched that by myself, I might not have nearly as fun of a time if I was watching it by myself as opposed to watching it with like eight of my dudes during a sleepover.
Yeah, well, I think one of it has to be like how straight it's played. Like whether it's aware that's kind of bad and it becomes campy, or if it's just like it really tries to take itself seriously and it just the delivery does not translate. So like in this movie, like did it seem like it started to get a little campy, like it was aware that was a bad movie? Because if so, maybe there's some merit to this.
I mean, once again, it's like 7 or 8 years ago, but I think either way, it's similar to you know how there's that saying that like when you do the most extreme imitation of someone, like whether it's the far left or the far right, it's hard to tell what you're making fun of and what is like a legitimate beliefs of that side of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's a certain rule that the internet calls it. I can't remember at the moment, but continue.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that where it's like, okay, maybe this guy is like kind of going over the top because he's an actor who just thinks that it's funny and bullshit, but it could also be one of these like bullshit Bigfoot guys who's just like, no, I know these trolls are out here and I know they love Christian blood.
Yeah. Yeah. Just looked it up. Poe's law, an adage saying that without a clear indicator of your intent, any parody can be mistaken for a sincere expression of the thing being parodied.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that it had a name, but yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I guess that makes sense because, like, I read a Whisker Away, which both of us watched and both of us hated because it was really
Yeah.
boring. But it's not like there was anything in there that was like taken too seriously or anything like this. If anything, it's just that it was supposed to be endearing and just interesting, and they just made a very boring world and a very slow storyline.
Yeah, and it really didn't have any weight, is what it felt like. Like, I don't know, it's just what even was the story? I can't even remember now that I like say that statement. Like, what was the story? I literally, it was too forgettable. I think she was sad about a guy, and she became a cat to get close to him or something.
Honestly, I don't even fucking remember at this point. I just remember we watched the entire thing and was like, when is this going to get good? It looks like, it has like the top movie on Netflix this week or something. And it was just boring the whole way through.
Yeah, that it was. That it was. I got another movie for you. But I want to stick with the theme, but I want to like actually take it a bit further.
Okay.
So I talked about Cars in my first one. Now I'm going to tell you about A Car's Life, and I want you to Google that, and I'll kind of like delve into it. You could see some of the critic review scores and everything as I go into it.
A Car's Life. All right.
So A Car's Life is a 2006 movie, which
Yeah, I
would have
can see
been
the reviews is the first thing that pop up, and they're very divisive.
yeah. It actually came out pretty similar to the time that Cars actually came out. They were both 2006. I don't know about the specific months, but point being, this movie is horrifying in every single way, and that you have a Lightning McQueen knockoff character with the most annoying sister. There's a moment where like they have gas forcibly stolen from them when they're out in the middle of nowhere, which is played way more horrifyingly than it needs to be. There's cars that smoke for some reason, the gas pumps that glare at you very aggressively. Like, even as a kid, I watched it and I was disturbed, particularly because the forcibly gas stealing scene, and they like put the little locks around their tires too, so the people couldn't move while it did it. It was like the movie was horrifying. I don't know who thought that was a good idea for children to watch, but like that thing traumatized me for a long time. I thought it was a fake movie that I imagined, like had a dream of, and I was really hoping that was the case. But I saw on a YouTube video like a year, maybe 2 years ago, someone discussed it, and so I watched their review, and it was every bit as bad as I remember.
Yeah, this I haven't seen this one, but it does remind me. I told you I've been watching a decent amount of Drew Gooden and Danny Gonzalez lately,
Uh-huh.
and they both will do some occasional like bad movie reviews and things like that. And one thing that they've both done is they find movies like these where it's just, I guess it's like a marketing scheme or something with these like small animation companies where whatever popular movie is coming out or announced to have be coming out, they will get like their cheap studio with like three animators on it to make something with a very similar name and a seemingly similar like plot or premise, and then
Yeah.
pump it out. Like there's some for like Kung Fu Panda where it's just like, fighting panda. They have something for like a bug's life, an ant's life, stuff like that, where the animation quality is so low. Just everything about it makes it seem like just this uncanny valley of just horror. And this is definitely that tier of bad movie where it's like, this is not made to be good or bad. This is just made to resemble something that is well known, so unknowing parents buy it for their children.
I think you're right because the character model looks surprisingly similar, and on top of that, Cars, the actual movie, came out in June 2006, and A Car's Life came out in November 2006. So that gives them about a, let's see, 5-month turnaround, which is just enough to make a crappy animated movie. Yeah, I think that
Exactly.
tracks.
Yeah, so that's a whole different side of crappy films that I wasn't even thinking about. Which those can also be like, when you watch it as a kid, could be terrible. If you sit down and watch this with some friends, this could be top tier.
Oh, no, like, if we watched it, we would be dunking on it the whole time, except where I'm, like, horrified crying in the corner when the gas is being stolen.
Of course.
Regardless, you get the idea.
But that's one of the things that makes me curious about, I guess, just like how the movie industry works. Because look at Sharknado, for example, and the 27 sequels it has at this point. Like,
Mhm.
that is a movie that is intentionally made to be bad. And it gets bad reviews, but then it gets like good reviews from people. And it's just like, how do you think that even gets started with like pitching that to a studio of like, here's a movie, it sounds stupid because it's supposed to be stupid, and we play it off like we're not realizing that it's stupid, but that's why people like it. Like, I just don't understand how those things get to be in production. It seems like such a hard line to draw between this is like just trying to be stupid for the sake of being stupid, between it like actually being executed well. And I don't know, it's just interesting.
I feel like it has to be someone who's aware of their capabilities and aware how to manipulate and, like, target audiences. 'Cause I think it could be both simultaneously true that a lot of people genuinely hate Sharknado, and just using that as the example, and a lot of people genuinely like it, and they are not the same people. Like, it's like a masterclass in identifying target demographics. It's like crazy. I couldn't even imagine trying to convince a studio to invest money into that, but I
Yeah.
guess knowing this age of the internet, they know how to work it.
Do you know if there's a genre for that kind of movie? Because there's movies that are like parody movies, like Scary Movie, Not Another Teen Movie, where like they're shitty comedy, but it's very apparent because they're parody. Like you can look at that in the genre. But something like Sharknado, if you look it up, wouldn't it just be like action, horror, suspense? Like nothing about that tells you what you're coming into unless you already know about Sharknado.
Yeah, I would say that would be the actual genre. I would say subgenre though. Like if you look up camp movies or campy movies, like what comes up is like very much I think what you have in mind. Like I see stuff that's like, let's see, to that's either scary movies, Soul Plane, whatever that is, Tammy and the T-Rex.
That sounds
uh
beautiful.
yeah, and there's just I don't know, Krampus pops up, obviously. There's Dragon Ball Evolution, Piranha Double D, which is, oh my god, literally just a close-up of a woman's chest on the cover art. Like, big ass spider. Point being, it's just like I think if you look up camp or campy movies, like, that is going to be the closest you're gonna get to this.
Yeah, that's what I see as well. It's just that when you look up like the genres for a movie, I have never seen campy put in to the movie.
I agree, but I also think it's probably because they would be hard as hell to market, like, in an actual movie theater versus just something direct to DVD or online.
Yeah, I guess especially like with the modern times of some of the biggest promotion that you can get is just social media promotion. And if something intentionally comes out with like campy in the genres, then it's probably going to be like, oh, well, it's intentionally this way. Where when people are flaming about like this movie's so terrible, no, you don't understand. It's supposed to be terrible. That's why it's great. Like I'm sure that can cause some talk going on, which is good for the movie.
Yeah, and I think the closest things that actually pulled it off in recent years would be like, I guess, Fantastic Mr. Fox and Sausage Party off the top
Yeah,
of my head.
I
Like,
enjoyed Fantastic Mr. Fox though. I don't think that one. I don't think that's supposed to be that way as much. But Sausage Party, I can see.
well, I actually, yeah, I also liked Fantastic Mr. Fox, but it looks visually horrifying, like the
Oh yeah, the
claymation.
visuals on it are definitely not my favorite.
Yeah, so I think it's like that had the art style intentionally to work for the movie it is. Like, it's not supposed to be refined cinema. It's its own thing, and like people can buy into that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Do you have another movie in mind for you, or should I just keep on going off on my list?
I have one where like I liked it as a kid, even though it was a bad movie. I'm not sure why I liked it.
All right.
Uh, do you remember Alvin and the Chipmunks, like the live action ones?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think there were two of them, but of course I remember.
I never saw the second. I watched the first and I really liked it. A couple of months ago, I went back to listen to the soundtrack of it. Or not even, no, it's like 1 month ago. I don't know why I said that because like getting into the Christmas spirit and like the first movie was like a Christmas movie by all means. Um, and I don't know. Like I listened to that soundtrack. I'm like, why did I ever like tolerate them? They're fucking annoying. But I don't know. I liked it as a kid. Did you like that movie?
Yeah, I liked it as a kid. I had the DVD. I even had the animated DVDs. But well, a couple things. One, I saw a YouTube video not too long ago that was like if you pitch down the voices so you get to hear what their actual voices are like, which was an interesting experience. Um, But then also, I remember that it was interesting because it says here that the first one came out in 2007 for the non-animated stuff. And I remember, being a child at the time, I also enjoyed the music, even if in retrospect it was terrible. But I feel like it had to be one of the biggest things to inspire like nightcore genre music, right?
I would agree. It's just don't ever tell them that because they'd probably find that very offensive.
Yeah, well, I enjoy Nightcore, and I mean, it really is just like to what extent you Nightcore it up if it gets to Alvin and the Chipmunks level or not.
That's fair. That's fair. I feel like my only real exposure to Nightcore has been the game Osu or Os, however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
Osu. Point being a rhythm beat based game for anyone who doesn't know that we both played in high school, and I haven't heard anything Nightcore since then. So it's been like a solid decade.
Yeah, dude, I'm amazed though. Some Nightcore songs on YouTube end up getting like 50 million views, 100 million views, and so on.
It's absurd.
Yeah, but I guess jumping on from Alvin and the Chipmunks, I was going to ask you, I'm not sure if you find these as entertaining as I do, but I really enjoy a lot of horror movies because
Uh
I
huh.
also think that those are really bad most of the time.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I think in part it also depends on your genre. You're gonna get a different style of bad if it's a slasher versus if it's a paranormal one, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but regardless, I find that a lot of those, like a slasher, you have the people who act like idiots. Paranormal, you have the jump scares, which can be like funny in some ways and stuff like that. Like the only stuff that you can't get that way to me is yeah, like a Tim Burton esque film where it's not necessarily like horror, but it has this eerie feeling to it, or like fuck, what's the one with Jack Nicholson, The Shining. There it
Yeah.
is. Like the Jack Nicholson movie has some aspects that you can look at and it's like, okay, that's kind of weird, that's kind of funny. But as a whole, like the horror in that is just the feeling of just like weirdness in the air, and that one I don't find as entertaining. But beyond that, like normal horror movies, they tend to have really low ratings, but I love to watch them, and a lot of people love to watch them, whether it's for the adrenaline or whether it's because you find them funny.
Yeah, growing up, I never actually watched like a lot of the more iconic ones. The only thing I really saw was like, ah, shoot, The Conjuring, and what's that one other really big like ghost franchise one?
Insidious.
Yeah, thank you, Insidious. Those are
Yeah.
the only ones I really saw. So as I've been older and, like, other people have introduced me to different styles of horror movies. In particular, I went to my cousin's house for Halloween and we watched Freddy versus Jason. And that was some of the most trash I've ever watched. Not even gonna lie. Like, I don't get no, I just don't really get the appeal, but, I mean, I could respect it, like, everyone there was really into it, talking about how much they loved slasher films and everything, so, like, it was, like, a day outside of my normal comfort zone of watching movies, and I could, like, appreciate it as long as I never have to do it again.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough.
Uh, but yeah, no, if that didn't, tell you, Freddy versus Jason was not my favorite.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where I think it's similar to any of the crossover things, like Alien, pretty good reviews. Predator, pretty good reviews. Alien versus Predator, and they're like 27 spin-offs. Not normally as good of reviews.
Or were they actually not seen as that good? Like, I haven't seen Alien, Predator, nor Alien versus Predator.
Alien by far, like the original trilogy, is the best received. But those are even ones where those kind of like have the opposite effect. They're like bad good movies to me, where like Alien is still good, but Predator, the original Predator, got pretty decent reviews. And now just looking back at it, if I've watched it recently, like you can say, okay, look at what it did for its time, which might be entertaining, but I just don't find it very action filled or very scary, if you want to put it in that category. And it's just interesting how certain things that were good become bad, or things that were bad become good.
Gotcha. It's just walking that fine line.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, the one that I opened up this podcast about is the Scooby Doo live action movies, and those have like pretty abysmal ratings on IMDb, on Rotten Tomatoes, and shit like that. And you could say that, oh well, they're just movies made for kids, but like when you and I went back and watched it in 2020 together, they're really bad in a hilariously done way, where it almost seems like that campy style, where it ends up being like, wow, I love this movie now even more than when I was a kid.
Yeah, it took on a different way of liking it, though, like a distinctly different appreciation, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, 100%. But it's just interesting how certain like movies can get better or worse just with how time evolves.
Yeah, I mean, especially like some I think some movies that people have like experienced things with are looking back on it, comedy in particular has aged poorly where they're like, "Ooh, we like this movie, but that aged really terribly." Funny example would be Spider-Man 1 with my man Tobey Maguire, how there was a very obvious iconic gay joke in it and everyone like kind of looks back on that and it's gone meme to death. Like that's also another thing that's going to change how one likes movies, just how well things aged or not.
Well, yeah, that's actually something I was going to ask you, that I was curious about, because you love Spider-Man just as a concept, but you also have a soft spot in your heart for the Tobey Maguire trilogy. And obviously the third one has gotten a lot of shit for some very obvious reasons, but also now there's so many memes about it where you could watch it where it's like the shit is actually good because it's so funny. So I'm just curious what your opinion on all of that is.
Yeah. So I'll address each of the three movies kind of separately a little bit. I do like Spider-Man 2. Like I rewatched all three of the original Spider-Man movies prior to the release of No Way Home, so about a year ago at this point. And number 1 and number 3, I fucking hated. I'm sorry. Like, well, okay, a controversial opinion, I prefer Spider-Man 3 over Spider-Man 1. Like, I don't care how much Spider-Man 3 got meme to death. Spider-Man 1 is boring in the worst ways. It has cringy Sam Raimi dialogue. I think like Spider-Man doesn't even have a real fight till halfway through the movie, like ignoring chasing down street level thug and fighting wrestler while being homophobic.
Yeah.
Like no fight happens and it's just a fucking like bam 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 scene transition, like just trying to get through the movie as fast as they can to fit the plot beats in. Spider-Man 1 sucks. I can only watch out of nostalgia. Spider-Man 3 sucks, but I actually like it because it's the way it sucks. It's like they just had to include a weird jazz piano scene. They just had to include some weird like
Emo Toby.
dancing and
Yeah.
pelvic thrust scene. They just had to include Eddie Brock praying for Jesus to kill Tobey Maguire because Eddie Brock plagiarized. Like it's just so many decisions are like, why did they do that? That I actually like it. And there's actually some like redeemable stuff in it. But Spider-Man 2, actually good. That's the only thing in the trilogy that holds up. And
Okay.
like, I love my Toby fanboys. I love the memes. The original trilogy sucks. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the first one has gotten worse with time because it's so easy to see the holes. The third one's gotten better because a lot of people shat on it, but now those things are funny. And the second
Yeah.
one just holds up.
Yeah, second one is actually good. Probably controversial opinion. I actually prefer the Amazing Spider-Man duology over the Tobey Maguire trilogy, but I'm not here to get flamed, so we'll move on from that.
Yeah. But all right, and another, I guess, type of bad movies that I wanted to bring up with you. I'm not sure how many you've seen, but movies that get adapted from either games or like anime series. Because there's Dragon Ball Evolution, which got
Oh
shit on so
my.
much. Which one of my sister's clients was even in that one. You know, me as a 9-year-old kid, I was like, oh man, I fucking love this. Later finding out that, oh god, this was terrible. But like, the one that started off everything with like the Super Mario movie from the 80s or whatever, and just so many movies, whether they're based on anime or games, almost always end up being absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, and I have largely purposely avoided them because I've heard what people have said about them, but one that I was kind of interested in was Assassin's Creed, because that had Michael Fassbender in it, if I recall correctly. Gonna fact check that.
All
And I
right.
really like Fassbender and things like, well, particularly the X-Men series because he was amazing in that. I think I watched Prometheus or Alien Covenant with him. I don't remember, but it's like the only thing in that series I watched, and I loved him in that. I loved him and Steve Jobs. I'm actually a huge Michael Fassbender fan, so I was so close to watching that, but I just didn't because of what people have said about those kind of movies in the past. Did you actually see that? Because if so, you could tell me if it was good or not.
The Assassin's Creed one?
Yeah.
I never saw that one. Like I said, for me,
No.
I saw like the Dragon Ball one, which, when I was a kid, I only got into Dragon Ball because like our friend Matthew was into Dragon Ball. And, it's when you're that young, a lot of things that you like are just because siblings or friends tell you about them. So I got into Dragon Ball. My sister told me, like, oh, my client's doing a Dragon Ball movie. And I watched it and I loved it. And then when, going back and thinking about it after I'd actually seen Dragon Ball Z and all of that stuff, it's a terrible movie. It doesn't follow any of the storyline. But I'm just so curious of like, do you have any idea why they decide to go so off the beaten path with like, okay, they hardly follow the storyline, if at all, with this stuff? They make like such questionable choices. Do you think it's just like, okay, this is Hollywood, they don't respect the original material? Do you think it's just like some Hollywood guy who's like, no, I want to make art, I want to make it my own thing, so I'll just use that as a basis to draw people in, and they end up not being good at it? Or I don't know, because it happens with so many video game or anime movies. And do you have any idea why?
I'm going to give a few relatively concrete ideas off the top of my head. One is player interactivity. Like, I think people really underestimate. Like, people will be like, "Oh man, they already made the game with a story. Why don't you just put that on the screen?" But I really think a lot of games wouldn't hold up to that same degree without significant changes to the story.
Hmm.
So and then even in games that do work in that manner, like The Last of Us, that one I'm sure you probably could more or less literally port straight to the screen. But then it's like they already know what's going to happen. They've seen it all. Is there any actual benefit to seeing it with actual live action actors versus animation that has incredible amount of depth and
Okay, that's
passion put
fair, but I
into
just want
it?
to jump in real quick to say fuck
Yeah.
you, because Dragon Ball is one of those examples of the movies. You and I both know they have released Dragon Ball games that go up to the
Yes.
same bit of story every single time for like 35 games.
But that's what I'm saying. It's the interactivity, the gameplay changes theoretically, and like, so on and so forth, little small changes. So like I feel like it's not as one to one as you might expect. You have to make changes. The only issue is the changes they make. That I will agree on. That makes no sense. Like some of the questions they make, the changes they make are so questionable. Like obviously the Avatar: The Last Airbender is a big example, but that's
Oh
more
yeah,
yeah,
with the
yeah.
rocks flying at half a mile an hour.
Yeah, with 6 earthbenders doing a 30-second dance prior to it. That's the kind of situation where it's like, why would you do that out of all the changes you have to make? So I fully understand why they make the changes. I don't understand why they make the changes that they do, is the way I'll put it.
Yeah, it really is interesting, especially with me having a little bit of insight, still not tons, but in the industry with having like gone to my sister's birthday parties and seen like, hi, I'm a director, hi, I'm an actor, and stuff like that. And I don't know, it just seems like people are so full of themselves. But obviously, there's people who have made good names for themselves in these industries. Where obviously, even if I think they come off as like assholes, they have to have some skill to them if they're at a job where they're making millions of dollars. But it
Yeah.
just like when you have a script essentially written in front of you with Avatar, with Dragon Ball, even if you have to adapt it to make things like with Mario, then it's just interesting to see how badly they manage to fuck it up every single time.
Yeah, no, I get you. And I guess kind of I'm going to do a bit of like role play putting my head into their headspace. Just thinking about it, if I was a director given someone else's game and script, one that would require that I actually read through or play through the whole thing, but ignoring that, like I could see it being a bit of an ego to say, "Hey, you're just here to like use your skill with live action, just follow their script, do their thing." Like that's not really your creative vision other than I guess sound direction and maybe like camera angles and whatnot. But aside from that, so then if the alternative is maybe you take the game's director and make them the movie director, again, I'm not too sure how well that would work. Like one thing that I'm kind of excited to see is both of us share one of our favorite video games of all time, Near Automata. They're coming out with an anime, but the thing is that's going to have to be relatively significantly different from the actual game because there's just some things that make it distinctly a game that
Did you say
cannot
Replicant or Automata?
automata.
Okay.
So like unless if they're gonna replay 9S's story right after the original one, like there's gonna be creative liberties that come in with perspective and whatnot, points
No,
of
they're just gonna go
views.
through all 26 endings or whatever. One where they eat the
Yeah.
fish, one where they fall
Well,
in water.
well, yeah. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Like I'm not too sure. Like just by virtue that just because he's a great video game director, he'd be a great movie director or anime director. Now, granted, I do believe he will, but I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily mean so.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree that, especially with games as opposed to anime or something, that you have to take some liberties because they can't transfer one to one.
Yeah.
But like, especially, have you seen the original Mario movie from like the 80s or whatever?
No, I'm scared to. I've seen like little snippets of that.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, the Mario Brothers end up being something like from Chicago or New York or something like that. They end up having that accent instead of an Italian accent, which is interesting. And then
Yeah.
they're plumbers. I think that's where they officially made it. So they're the Mario Brothers of Mario Luigi or Mario and Luigi Mario. um, but yeah, like Bowser's a dinosaur, and there's like an alternate dinosaur world where just like after some shit happened, it split into dimensions and all of this shit, and they just don't go off of like anything with the game. And I can understand of needing to take liberties, but it's one thing to like, okay, well, we can't just have Mario jump on Goombas for an hour and a half and platform, but you can do the same general thing of like, okay, they're in this mystical world. A princess gets kidnapped. He goes through these different terrains and platforms, almost like a Lord of the Rings scenario, and that could
Yeah.
be a little bit more easy to understand as a one to one. And hopefully, Automata does something similar. Granted, the animated stuff ends up being a little bit better than the live action, but I,
Yeah.
I, I don't know. It's weird, but I mean, speaking of Mario stuff, the new Mario movie
I
is
was gonna
coming
say,
out.
let's hope for the best for that one. I'll start by asking, do you plan on watching it?
I mean, realistically, I would like to watch it, but unless it goes on YouTube Premium or something for like $5, I just never get out of my ass. Get out of my. I
You
never get
never.
out of my ass. I'm just too busy fucking myself. To go to the movie theater. So I guess we'll see.
That's fair. I feel like it's the kind of thing that I do for an ironic viewing with friends, but then like, do I really want to spend money on that? Like, that's the kind of thing I would rather just pirate, get bored halfway through, and then stop watching.
Dude, I just honestly, I would probably unironically like the movie more if it was all like Chris Pratt's original Twitter video or whatever, where he doesn't do a Mario voice and just goes, "It's a me, Mario," and just the whole movie is in that voice.
You know what? I support that. I support that.
Yeah.
I guess just one thing I do want to like contribute really quickly in the whole like video game to movie adaptation thing. As you might know, I'm a pretty decent Silent Hill fan. I watched the Silent Hill movies. they are some of the least scary movies I've ever seen for being based on one of the most scary video game franchises ever. And that actually is the same for the Resident Evil ones, but those ones are at least a bit more quality.
Yeah.
And
Was the
yeah,
storyline of the Silent Hill ones like? I mean, obviously, each Silent Hill game they're not connected to my information, right?
no, it's pretty much like half the games are based around a cult storyline, the other half are just personal demons and whatnot. And so
Yeah.
the movie went off the cult storyline, I would say, unfortunately, but
Okay.
that's just
But it was
my
just
opinion.
executed horribly.
It really was. It was the least scary thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't know. It's amazing just how many bad types of movies there are, whether they're intentionally bad, whether they're the video game bad, whether it's Morbius and the Morbin time. But man,
I
movies are movies.
I have one more for you if you want to go into it.
Yeah, hit me with the last one, make it big, and then I think we'll be good to end the episode.
All right. So to give context, me and Dylan both like a YouTuber in common, Jack's Films. I don't watch him as often anymore, but point being, around the time the Emoji Movie was coming out, this guy just memed the hell out of it for like months straight. So much so that he got invited to some VIP private like screening or like opening day or whatever for it. I don't remember what it was, but he manifested himself into reality. And I watched that movie. I'll let you share your thoughts first if you saw it. Otherwise, I'll jump right in.
Well, I'll tell you, most of the movies that have come out in the past like 5 or 6 years, I have seen exclusively on airplane rides to and from Korea because
Is
they
the
have.
Emoji Movie one of them?
That is one of them. I was just like, man, there's so many movies. Like there was the Scoob movie that came out, the animated Scooby Doo movie, which came out like a year or two ago. Watch that on Korea. Watch the one where The Rock climbs some giant building or whatever the fuck it is. And yeah, I watched the Emoji movie, and like I can understand why people shit on it because it's bad, but realistically, I find it just about as good as like a Wreck It Ralph, to be honest.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only things that really stood out to me as particularly bad was the Candy Crush advertisement, and I think the Just Dance, I think it was advertisement. Like excluding the two of those like scenes, I didn't actually have all that much of an issue with the movie. Like it was adequate. Like I really do think, yeah, it was on par with most children's movies like that don't go down in history. Like I don't know, Monsters Inc. My favorite.
Yeah, I don't know. It is interesting. Was just I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason why we think of movies as terrible as they are these days is because the internet makes it so much easier. Because Morbius got memed to death, and like if this was 20 years ago when the internet was just a baby, I doubt that like Morbius would have just been a bad movie that flopped and no one would remember it.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue at this point no one even remembers it either.
That
Like
is true.
we all made It's Morbin time jokes for like 2 months and
But
and,
at least
and
if you said it's Morbin time or Morbius, someone would know what you're talking about. Even if they're like, man, you are, 6 months to a year behind on that.
yeah.
But if it came out 20 years ago and, like there's certain things that have that cult following, like The Room and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's just, I think the internet makes it so much easier for things to get shit on.
No, I would agree. Have you actually seen The Room or no? Cuz I
No, I
haven't.
just know of it because I know it is a cult classic.
Yeah, I know of The Room, and then I think it was the Disaster Artist that would made it in like reference to it, or I guess it's based off of it. But I don't know. I haven't felt any strong desire to watch either movie.
I don't know. Well, you do have your movie bucket list, so maybe one day.
Oh, trust me, neither movie is on that bucket list. I try to do things that I actually want to watch.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, all right. So that good enough talk for me. You had some movies, so we made it over 30 minutes. Congrats, Jonathan.
There we go. We did it.
All right. So till next time, ta for now.
Toot toot for new.